there, beautiful people. It's Maria. It's Thursday, and I've made a commitment to show up live every week at noon on Thursday on Facebook and on Instagram. And every week, right before this camera starts, I get a little nervous. I feel my heart beating and my stomach churn. And then I get going, and then I lose my nervousness. But this week it's a little bit different because I'm not going to give you a list of symptoms to an illness, and I'm not going to just give you some important information and some important facts, but today I'm going to share with you like my personal experience and understanding and be another one of the tiny voices in the loud concert of those that are uprising and standing up for racial equality, right? And so my nervousness today requires a different form of courage to show up. And my intention here is to bear witness, right? To bear witness to systemic racism. And what bear witness means, it means to acknowledge that something is real. So systemic racism is real, and the trauma is real, and the trauma has influenced us for generations, and that trauma is in our bones and in our cells and in our lineage, and that is very real. Okay, and so today, my voice feels tiny, and of course I don't have the words to adequately express or to acknowledge the gravitude of this situation. At the same time, nonetheless, I'm going to come and speak my voice and give my voice up as support to stand in union with all the other voices that are rising up and being part of the collective. Because as much as I want to go and I love my silent time and I love being a little bit sequestered away from the busyness of life right now, and I want my stillness and silence, now is not the time to be silent or to be standing idly by and just like doing your own thing. Now is the time to use your voice and use your actions and to stand up, right? And it's really the time to verbally say, I support Black lives, right? I support people of color. And it's a real time of deep reckoning and of self-assessment, right? And it's a time that, even for me personally and for a lot of people, to realize and look in our own lives and see how that we white women have perpetuated racism without even knowing it. And so even though you hear the words a lot, well, just because it doesn't affect you means you don't care. And I don't think that's an accurate statement. I think it's more just because it doesn't affect you, you're going on like your life has always gone on, and you're unaware of how your behaviors are hurting other people. And so I'm even assessing all these things within myself, because I used to, just like 2 days ago, considered myself to be one of the good white ones. One of the ones that was like, me and the people of color against the racists. And now I'm like, oh, I have to reassess all these concepts of identity and of your practice and of your words. And even to assess the good, even the word good, you have to reassess that. And so today's message really is about me learning and unlearning and assessing and living with the consequences of systemic racism. And I have simply two little insights to share. I don't want to talk too much about myself, but I have a few insights to share that have been coming to me through these last few days. And there are things that you already know, but then when you see them and feel them again in your body, it just breaks your heart. At least it does mine. So just on a personal level, last winter, I really grappled with the whole concept of self-worth. Once I stopped attending births, I didn't feel like I had any value because I wasn't really serving the community anymore in a way that was really significant like I was before. And so then that really led to a whole identity and finding worth, and then trying to realize, oh, your worth isn't tied up in your profession or what you say or what you do. It's just you as a being is worthy and valuable. But before I really came to that, and I'm still in that process. You know, you look for your self-worth and making videos and selling herbal products and doing all these things to do the right thing for people. And you look to other people and you look to relationships, and then even though you're trying to show up, there's still all these like layers and layers of rejection, and then you realize you're looking for something outside of you. And then you have to learn ultimately that the greatest love of all is within inside you, and that we're realizing that you're connected to something that's far bigger and far greater than you, which is like God and the earth, right? But systemic racism perpetuates the whole concept of unworthiness to masses amounts of people. So in our lives individually, we'll all should at some point in time come to the point where we come to the self-reckoning of, am I worthy, right? But systemic racism sends a message to Black men and women and children, Latin men and women and children, Indian, Native American, Asian, Jewish people, all the people, right? It sends a message that you are not worthy. And unless you can fit into the oppressive system and do the job that I'm asking you to do, then your life is of very little consequence and it is disposable. Yet racism is saying that for Black men, in a lot of ways, they're more valuable to the powers that be in the prison system. Hispanic people are more valuable in the chicken factory. Other people are more valuable if they fit into this mold and into this system that we've created. And if they do not fit into the system, their life is of zero consequence, right? And when you let that sink in, of all these people's lives are disposable, and when you think that's not just like on an individual level, that's on a rampant race level, it's very damaging, it's very draining, and it's disheartening, and it breaks your heart. And that's really been coming to me, because not only do people feel this every day, people of color feel this every day, they feel this when they go to school, they feel this in their court systems, they feel this at their workplace, they feel this in their cities and the courts and the hospitals, within people that are just walking by, right? And so we have our own individual concept of self-worth, and then we have this other thing placed on you. And so that's been real heavy on me, of realizing that, of how painful and heavy that is a burden for people. The second insight that came to me this week was about midwifery and how much racism has permeated midwifery. And so I've known for a long time that racism is the reason why Arkansas midwives are legal. So let me give you a little brief history of Arkansas midwifery. So in the 1940s, Arkansas was segregated, right? And in this time, there were massive amounts of women dying in childbirth. You had white women up in the mountains, in the Ozark Mountains, dying in childbirth, and you had Black women down in the Delta dying in childbirth. These two groups of women were different from each other, yet they had similar threads that bound them together. They're poor, they're uneducated, they're illiterate, and they don't have access to medical care. The white women didn't have access to medical care because of the distance, and they didn't have a car, and by the time they could actually even make it to the hospital, they didn't have the money to pay for medical care. And then the Black women lived in a segregated situation, and they simply were not allowed to come to the hospital whether they're dying, right? So Arkansas had to figure something out. And there's something that we still have in common with the old days. Racism and poverty run rampant in Arkansas. But they tried to find a solution. And so one of the solutions that they found was, if we train midwives, we can train white midwives and we can train Black midwives. And they can go into their communities, and hopefully they can save some lives, and we don't have to look so bad when everybody's dying in our state, but we still don't have to let the Black people in our hospital. And so they trained all these midwives, and there was a primary midwife leader. Her name was May Odessa Hale. And these midwives had to go through these like cumbersome hoops, just like modern midwives have to do now. They had all these unrealistic rules and regulations that were in no way really in alignment with attending biological birth. And they had these protocols and paperwork and extensive training and like the ways that these midwives were trained to go to these births were pretty much like overseeing the woman and making her lay down and all these vaginal checks and all these things that really aren't in alignment with a biological birth. But nonetheless, the positive side is at that time there were hundreds of midwives in Arkansas, and a vast majority of them were black midwives, and they saved lives in their community. You fast forward to today, we are one of the few licensed states and legal states in the United States. We were the first few to be legal in the United States. There's still states in the United States that midwifery is illegal. And currently, there are less than 40 midwives in the entire state of Arkansas, and there are 0 black midwives. There was one. She was a friend of mine recently, and she recently just passed away. Her name was Isis Brown. May she rest in power. Whew. Anyways, so I'm acutely aware that my ability to stand here and say that I'm a licensed midwife and my privilege to be a midwife comes from the hard work of the black reigning midwives that have been unacknowledged and unrecognized. Most people don't even know that there were black reigning midwives in the state of Arkansas, and that is through their work and through their commitment and through their courage that I get to stand here. And in modern times, just generally speaking, in Arkansas, very few African American and black women choose midwifery care. It's probably for a lot of different reasons. One is there's no black midwives to serve them in a cultural context that feels familiar and safe. Another reason is because choosing a midwife and having a home birth is expensive. And another reason is because there's a stigma of having a home birth and a midwife, that represents the old ways, and people don't want to go back to the old ways. They want to leave that bondage and that baggage and desegregation, and they want to move forward into a future that's more liberating. And when they see that midwife, it kind of means that they're kind of going back to something, and people don't want to go back, and I understand that. So at the same time, here we are in modern America, and we are like one of the, we have all the money and all the resources, yet African American women still die 2 to 3 times more rates. There are 2 to 3 times higher rates of maternal mortality in childbirth than when you compare that to white women or other women of color. And that is within our grasp. That is something that we can address. And there are black midwives right now, not necessarily in Arkansas, but in other parts of the United States, that are running birth centers and midwifery education schools, and they are reaching out and they're really trying to help save these women's lives and bring awareness. And so if you want to know more about that, I'll put a link to her school. Her name is Jeannie Joseph. She's been rising up as a powerful black midwife leader in the community. And so I want to shout out to her and acknowledge her. Yeah. And so what else do I want to say? This is going to be a pretty short video. Really. So also I've been asking myself, like, well, what are some resources and what are some ways to, and how do we envision what racial equality looks like? And last night I was on this call, and there were these people from all over the world, and there was this one group of women that were in a racial and racism awareness group, and they were the leaders of this group. And so they answered that question. And so I'm going to read what their answers were, okay? Because this came from them. So they envisioned, what would it look like to have a society free from racism? And so this was their first answer, is systemic equity. Everyone would get what they need, and people would be met where they are. Showing compassion, empathy, care, and kindness. The next one is mindfulness is a moment-by-moment practice. Kindness is so important, it made it to the list twice. Kindness. The next one is forgiveness is rampant. Reconciliation and restoration underlie all of our systems. Radical generosity. Seeing the best in others first, rather than seeing them wrong or dangerous. Being intentional and understanding in the impact of our actions on the lives of other people. And seeing the earth and all its creations and all its animals as a part of who we are, and it's vital to our existence. That comes from like a feminine power perspective, right? And so one last thing essentially is that, here we are, we're people, and it's the time is now, right, to rise up, and we're people that are standing in solidarity. But I also want us to acknowledge that we're capable of holding the paradox. There's so many paradoxes that are happening right now. And what I mean by that is this racism, this has not been happening right now. I mean, I don't know if any of you remember the beating of Rodney King when we rioted in the streets. Before, we remember that this has been a long and pervasive problem. And what's happening is terrifying, and it's traumatizing, and at the same time, we're going to be okay. And also, what's happening right now is we're breaking down systems and breaking down barriers, and yet when we're creating new systems, and that can be exciting. And when you see the systems break down and the streets burn and people beaten, that's heartbreaking, right? And terrifying. And so we can have our hearts breaking wide open and be excited and be terrified all at the same time, right? And so where do we turn with our broken hearts? Like, what do we do? Where do we turn with our broken hearts? And so, I'm exploring this just like everybody else, but leaning into the pain, right? The pain reveals your next steps. The pain is not something to be shying away from. Nervousness or being afraid is not something to be shying away from. So at the same time, we can't just run out and just fix it. It's not like a quick fix thing. This is like a long battle that takes generations, right? It takes generations and generations to do the right thing, especially when no one's even looking. And I want to say, like, in women's empowerment groups, all my videos are about women's empowerment and birth and midwives and babies and herbs. And so in women's empowerment groups, we're always talking about the path to self-actualization and self-realization, right? But it's really clear to me, the path of self-realization is the path of wholeness. And there is no way that any one of us can ever become whole when our brothers and sisters are not whole also, right? And so we cannot self-actualize by ourselves, right? We have to have shared commitments to each other. We have to commit to listening to each other, to questioning our own assumptions. We have to commit to supporting financially. We have to commit to sharing resources, creating new policies. We have to commit to showing up. Even when we don't know what to say, and we know we're going to say it wrong, and we're going to mess it all up, we still have to do that, right? It's just, my message today is really simple and really short. It's clearly not the time to just remain silent and just say, well, I'm not a racist, right? We have to be vocal. We have to take action. We have to be anti-racist. And really in this moment, I'm taking just a moment to stand in reverence and respect and in solidarity with Black Lives Matter. So I'm going to close my eyes for a minute. I'm not going to do the whole 8 minutes, right? But because you guys are like on Facebook and you're about to scroll on, but I do want to say a couple of things. One more thing, essentially, is like this movement has momentum right now, and it's the time. Like when you're in the garden, there's the time of the peony, and there's the time of the iris, and there's the time right now the dahlia is blooming. Right? It's the time for Black Lives Matter to shine and to bloom and to rise up. And that momentum, that life force, that like activism momentum, I want once it's time to transition to the next thing is to that I really, my heart goes out to all of our Latin, Hispanic, Mexican, Central American men, women, and children that are living in the United States in constant fear. They cannot show up to those protests because if they show up to those protests, they're going to be picked up by ICE and they're going to be put in detention centers, right? ICE is another example of police brutality, and there are still people locked in cages, and it is still unacceptable. And so we're standing in solidarity with Black Lives Matter, and let it ripple out, and stand in solidarity with our Hispanic brothers and sisters too. And I want to bow out here, and I'm going to do this in the way that we do it in Tai Chi and in Kung Fu. Because you're going to make a fist with your right hand. You are strong, you're rising up, you're skilled, and you're capable, right? You have strength, you have a voice, you have a presence, you're going to use it, right? This is yang, boom, very yang. And then here's yin, this is the sun, this is the moon, this is yin. Yin covers it. There's reverence, there is respect, there is control, there is discernment. And you bring these to your heart because you care. You have compassion and you have capability to hold the paradox and hold the opposites. And you love deeply, you love yourself and you love everyone, right? And so, and your work is meaningful. And so you're going to put your heart out as you bow your head. You put your heart out into the world, right? And then when you rise up and you bring your hands back to your heart and you rise up, all these good things are going to come right back to you. That law of karma is going to come right back to you. And then when you stand up, you step out and you take your place in this world. Your presence is valuable. Even though racism's message is that you are not worthy, that is a lie. That is an illusion. Each and every one of us is worthy just for being. Okay. Until next time, my friends, drink deep waters from the earth, and always walk in beauty.